Should be. Hello. Hi, Dave. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm doing very well. Pleasure to see you.
Lovely to see you. And welcome to everyone that's joining us this afternoon. And thank you to everyone who's joining us on the replay. I'm Lisa. I'm founder of the Wentworth Collective. And the Wentworth Collective is an event management consultancy. And we design and deliver exceptional experiences that have lasting impact for our clients. And I'm joined here today with Dr. Dave Hall from the Ideas Centre, and we're here to discuss how to unlock conventional thinking and creativity. You know, we're living in a time where we seem to be moving a little bit backwards, and these techniques that Dr. Dave Hall has are really interesting. And I'm personally really excited for this conversation. I've known Dave for nearly a decade now, I think. I was fortunate enough to take part in one of your techniques in the programs, a 3-hour program, but also since then, I was so blown away by the creativity. I was saying to you earlier when we were talking about this that I remember when I came to the session, that I had a problem that I've been trying to fix for ages. And I was going round and round and round in circles. And your session came at the right time. And suddenly it was unlocked. And that was it. I was a fan. So I was really excited when we could then use your techniques with one of my client programs as well, which we're going to talk about later. So first of all, thank you, Dave. Really, thank you a lot for joining us today. You left corporate life in 2011 to establish the Ideas Centre, and I know that you're passionate about business transformation and how to unlock, breakthrough thinking. And you've worked with a variety of sectors, but I don't want to do your career history an injustice. For those who are joining us today, do you want to give us a brief overview of your career to date, and what is this subject that we're talking about today?
Sure. No, it'd be an absolute pleasure. And I should start off by disclaimer. I always think I'm a fraud when I speak at these kind of events because I'm not a guru, I'm not an expert, I'm not an academic in any of I'm a metallurgist by training, for goodness sake. So I am none of those things, and I'm conceivably the least creative person involved in this session today. My background is science and engineering, of all things. The muse never visits me overnight, that's for certain. But what I can do is follow a process. And many years ago, early 1990s, I was manufacturing director for an organization in the petrochemical industry, and I was doing some management training and tripped over a whole bunch of materials around creative problem solving, which was introduced really badly. It was, the theory was really badly explained, the techniques were weird, but very early on, we had to try one of these techniques as a part of the experience in-house. And so I did it, got a small group of people together, started using what was clearly a bonkers technique. It was just madness. The whole thing was weird. But very early on, we started generating ideas the like of which we'd never seen before. No matter how clumsily we applied this weird technique, we got thinking we'd never thought of before, but which in retrospect seemed blindingly obvious. We tried the techniques, they worked. We tried the ideas, they worked. Rather than it being a one-off exercise, I'm an engineer. If it works, do more of it. So we did more and more of it. And I kind of post-rationalized why it worked and then took the techniques wherever I went, because then I could embed it inside the organization, pragmatic as ever. I ran a contract electronics company, took the techniques in there, transformed the place. For 10 years, I was chief exec of the doping control laboratory for British horse racing, took the techniques in there. We transformed it after 38 years of consecutive monthly deficits, never turned in a surplus in any of its history in 38 years. I knew damn certain that thinking the same old way wasn't going to work. We had to challenge the way people thought about what they did, and I had techniques for that. We turned surplus in month 6. Became embarrassingly profitable and privatized in 2007, sold again in 2010. I missed a management buyout at that point under the heading of damn it, thought I'm not getting any younger. If ever I'm going to do my own thing, now's the time to do it. So I set up the Ideas Centre, which is the distillation of all that transformative learning using creativity techniques to drive innovation. So for the last 10 years, the Ideas Centre is all about helping organizations understand what locks you in conventional and traditional thinking, and then introduces you to techniques to allow you to escape. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Brilliant. So what's interesting, actually, what you're saying is that, you know, we'll be remiss not to mention COVID, and obviously we are going to mention it in this discussion, but what we're talking about is something that we've been talking about anyway, regardless of COVID, it's so important for organisations to have this breakthrough thinking and move forward and change patterns and drive innovation, much what you were saying before about what you did with, with the organisation that you were working with. And I remember when we were working together on one particular project, again, this particular organisation wanted to embed change and create some new ideas. It was a leadership conference. And what's interesting is that you were booked as a keynote, and all you were going to do was speak for 3 hours. But as the process developed and we got more interesting, we thought, well, actually, why don't we get people primed for this particular event and start to get them ready when they arrive there with these techniques, so that your keynote just happens to be part of the processes that they're learning already.
Absolutely. And actually, giving a keynote, let's say there's a 40-minute keynote which entertains and it makes people think a bit differently, and it's something, even if it's something that people remember, it doesn't embed inside the organization. Embed in the organization needs to make it their own. Having a keynote speaker, it's fine. It transforms nothing. It's all about doing it yourself in-house. Exactly. And my focus is entirely on doing that. The last thing you want is a consultant swanning in continuously. Every time you want to do some creativity and innovation, bring in Dave. I don't think so. No. I'll show you how to do it. It's all about doing it yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. So, we were saying that. So we've spoken about, so all very well bringing you in as a keynote, and it'll be a very interesting chat as we're experiencing that. But why do you think your techniques are so important to businesses and organizational structure?
Well, because I think every organization says they want to do things differently. I think, organizations across the land are saying, we need to innovate, we need to do things differently. And what they typically do is get groups of experts together. And those experts are the creators and the guardians of how we've always done things around here. And what they'll do is come up with you'll tell them to think differently, and they'll nod dutifully, and then come up with variations of the same old. Of course they will. And those same old ideas that will give you incremental improvement point at continuous improvement. And for decades now, since kind of the 70s, we've had continuous improvement embedded progressively in our organizations. And it's now the only mode of thinking we have. We kid ourselves that it's driving innovation. It is not driving innovation. It's driving more of the same thinking. And what we need to do is to transform that. And to do that, we need to think differently. And for that, we need to inject the creativity. I'm a big fan of continuous improvement, by the way. But from time to time, we need to break free from that and do things differently. And that's the focus of creativity, linked to innovation.
And I mean, what often happens is that people look to the past, don't they? And they look at what they've done before, and they think, well, we've done that before. They look retrospectively, don't they?
Absolutely. And that I said before, that people come up with same old thinking. The experts are the creators and the guardians of that world. We all make sense of our worlds by looking backwards.
Exactly.
Now, it sounds like an odd thing to say, but if you think about it, it's obvious. If any one of you who's watching in has a problem today, the first thing you'll do faced with a problem is you'll look backwards. Because the first thing you'll do is look at your past experience, your knowledge, your training, your education. You'll scan through it, grab what you think is relevant, apply it to today. That then determines your future behavior. So your future behavior is massively conditioned by your past experience, which is a tiny fraction of the sum total of knowledge and experience that's out there in the universe. So we can improve over time, but we improve at a much, much slower rate, always based on that backward-looking perspective. It's nonsense. We need to do things differently.
Exactly. So what you're saying is, instead of the first point of, when you've got problems to look backwards, you need to look forward, but you need to look in a new way.
Well, you do. And to do that, you need to break the patterns of the past, because we store information. We've evolved very well, and we've been very successful on a kind of an evolutionary basis. And we make sense of our worlds by looking backwards. It's a very neat trick. And we do that by pattern matching. We are brilliant pattern matchers. We store information, our understanding, knowledge, experience is stored as patterns in an enormous virtual filing cabinet inside our brains. And what we're doing continuously, subconsciously, is making sense of what's happening around us with reference to those patterns. It's as if subconsciously we're constantly flicking through the filing cabinet to find patterns to help us make sense of today, which then determine future behavior. So those patterns, which are fixed in time in a world that's changing ever so quickly, are becoming increasingly out of date. We have old, out-of-date patterns to make sense of today to determine our future behavior. If you want to be creative and innovative, we have to destroy or at least suspend judgment on those patterns. We need to fragment those patterns, get rid of them to liberate us to think differently. That's what these creativity techniques are all about.
And tell me about, which we discussed before, about having novel and useful, right? Like, because what we were saying, we mentioned about looking in the past, but actually looking forward for the newness.
Absolutely.
You have to have new ideas, don't you? You have to think differently.
Exactly. And we have I reckon every organization in the land says they want to be, that says that they're innovative. No one says, oh, we don't innovate. They have no definition of what they mean by innovation, but they want to be it. I've had so many people say they'll know it when they see it. That's how they manage innovation. Brilliant. Creativity is kind of weirder because it's pink and fluffy and a bit silly around the edges, and it's kind of all childish behavior and what have you, which is nonsense. This is serious creativity. We need to have a serious definition of creativity, and the one we use is the definition of creativity is the generation of ideas that are both novel and useful. It is novelty combined with usefulness. We as adults are brilliant when it comes to useful, but we are rubbish when it comes to novel. Absolutely rubbish. We are really quick to useful because useful is based on the way we've always done things before. It is rewired in our brains. It's in our filing cabinets, our patterns of the past. So we are really quick to useful, but horribly slow to novel. Novel is simply new. So, Lisa, if you've got a problem that you can't solve, and you come to me as a creative facilitator, and I can give you an idea that's novel, basically you've never thought of it before.
Yes.
So if I can give you an idea you've never thought of before, that's what I mean by novel. If I'm not going to go away and research whether someone somewhere else in the world has ever thought about it before, why would I do that? This is pragmatic. It is an engineer's view. If you've got an idea you've never thought of before, that's novel. And if you're excited because you can see how it might work, you can see how to make it useful.
Yes.
And it's that combination of novelty combined with usefulness, which is the transformative thing. We need help, however, because adults, if I ask you for a novel and useful, I've got a problem, can you give me a creative idea? You'll quickly give me a useful idea. And that useful idea locks us in our world of what is, the way we do things around here. Yeah. Any attempt to reject novelty into it is then rejected by every fibre of your being because it threatens what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
So any creativity technique has to be a two-stage process. And the first stage of the process is what we refer to as an intermediate impossible. And it's what tends to freak people out when it comes to creativity, because it's the generation of an idea that is novel but useless. It must solve the problem, but it must be impossible to implement it. Useless. Novel, it can be bonkers, ridiculous, outrageous. Quite frankly, it can be illegal, indecent, immoral, as far as I'm concerned. But it must solve the problem, if only it were possible. First stage of creativity. So if you give me an idea that's novel but useless, holding my finger up here, that's my novel and useless idea. All I have to do then is to identify the characteristics of that idea that make it work. So this idea would solve the problem, but it's impossible to implement. Here's the characteristics of the idea that make it work. Get rid of the idea, but keep the characteristics. Now do what we as adults are very good at, find a useful way of delivering exactly the same outcome. Bang! You end up with an idea that's both useful, because you've got a useful idea, but it has all the characteristics of the novel idea you generated in the first place. Effectively, the novel and useless idea, which tends to freak people out, because I didn't get where I am today by generating useless ideas. This is stupid. It's just a Trojan horse to give us a set of characteristics, which will then allow us to generate a useful idea with the same characteristics. Bingo, you end up with an idea that's both novel and useful. Can't fail. Can't fail.
So what you're saying actually is you need to have this open, I suppose, your free mind to come out with crazy, crazy, crazy ideas.
Absolutely.
But then I hear what you're saying, and we're going to go into the techniques in a little bit about how we can do that. But for example, why do you think, say, a brainstorm, because arguably you could say, well, okay, Dave, we're going on a retreat next week and we're going to have a flip chart and we're going to have a brainstorm. We'll mind map everything out on the wall, surely we'll come out with our ideas that way. Why we ban the flip chart?
And you've got the best brains in the company and in that off-site session. So surely that's the best people to get together for a brainstorming session. I love brainstorming, by the way. Don't get me wrong on this stuff. It's just that it's not creative.
Right.
Brainstorming is brilliant if what you want is continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is fed by useful ideas. So if you want continuous improvement, brainstorming is brilliant. What you do is get a group of experts together. Remember, we define creativity as the generation of ideas that are both novel and useful. What we do with brainstorming is get a group of experts together, but by the way, are the creators and the guardians of how we do things around here. We ask them to generate as many ideas as possible and tell them to suspend judgment, think outside the box, and they all go, yeah, we'll do that. What's more, just to make sure they think outside the box, we tell them to do it quickly.
Yes.
As if that will help them think outside the box. Don't forget, we're rubbish at novel, brilliant at useful. Useful ideas are based on the world in which we're trapped and are really quick to develop. Novel ideas are really slow because it's a new thought process. So we have condemned everyone just to give us a long list of useful ideas. And if all you want is useful ideas, keep doing brainstorming. Because if anyone dare gets novel, you give them that brainstorming look, which says, why on earth did you come out with that? That's clearly won't work around here. How long have you been here? A week? Oh, for goodness sake, come back when we've brainwashed you and you can play like the rest of us. Yeah. Then you can contribute to our brainstorming session.
And and presumably you're going to be measured on the results of how full your flip chart is when you come back.
How many ideas did you generate in how short a time? Well, if anything is going to feed continuous improvement, which is simply the implementation of useful ideas, not novel, useful ideas. Innovation, by the way, creativity is the generation of ideas that are both novel and useful. Innovation is just the implementation of creative ideas to give you the step function change. Yeah. If you like the novelty, what you're doing is driving continuous improvement, which is brilliant, but it's not innovation.
No. So we're going to talk about some of the techniques in a moment, but I just think before we do that, we'd be remiss not to touch on, COVID and the time that we're living in right now. Presumably now more than ever, we're being challenged to think more differently, and also we're in isolation. We're away. The techniques which we're going to talk about soon, you do need other people. And that's number one. But then I suppose number two, we are being challenged because we're living in a new way of life. We have to think differently. How has COVID affected? What are your views on COVID, and how has it affected sort of creativity and innovation within organisations?
COVID's created an extraordinary set of circumstances. We all know that, and much of it is tragic and much of it is uncomfortable. And I know that, but park that for a second. It's also transformative in the way that it's led to a change in thinking. What COVID did effectively on the 23rd of March from a UK perspective, when the lockdown was announced, it took our patterns of everything that had gone before. So forget that. That's no longer relevant. What you've now got is a completely different world, but that, by the way, none of us have ever experienced before. So there's no pattern behind it. We're not comfortable with it because we don't have a pattern. We need to have patterns. We've got a filing cabinet with a gaping hole in the COVID folder because we've never been there before. We do not like it. But all the creativity techniques that I use start by trying to scramble your world of what is. We're trying to destroy the patterns that constrain your thinking. These patterns are brilliant for continuous improvement and for evolution. They are rubbish for creativity because they lock you in a conventional thought process. At a stroke, all those patterns were destroyed and people had to think differently. And look at the innovation it drove. How many organizations across the land were battling with the rollout of Teams over the previous years with various pilot programs and what have you, tentatively pushing forward, but people didn't like it, so we'll pull it back again and we'll try again with a different group. And oh, this is so hard. COVID came 23rd of March. By the 25th of March, I reckon almost every organisation with Office 365 across the land had rolled out Teams in one form or another. And we love it. We love it. Why would you have a phone call? Why would you ever do something by mobile phone anymore when it comes to communicating? Because it's second nature. So what it's done effectively is taught us that the scrambling of the patterns leads to discomfort, but that discomfort is a key transitionary phase. It's that novel and useless. It's novel, it's kind of weird. It's that kind of intermediate impossible that allows us to generate completely fresh thinking. The last thing we want to do is go back to how things were before. People say, it'll soon get back to normal. What they mean is that pattern that we had before COVID is we'll get back there eventually and we'll forget all the benefits we generated over the recent months. Or they say it'll soon get back to a new normal. A new normal is about locking in this new way of doing things. Yeah. That now becomes the lock that kills creativity. What we need to do is learn the value of agile, flexible learning and understanding, fluidity of the brain to move and suspend judgment and generate completely fresh thinking.
No, absolutely.
That's what I think.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a good chance for us to now delve into the techniques, because we've been forced to think differently. Like you said, we've got this new pattern that this is I hate to use the phrase, the new normal, because, you know, we now using Teams is a way of life. That's just one example.
Sure.
But what you're saying is we need to have an open mind. You know, we need to be able to be open to these new techniques. You know, we're going to put the flip chart in the bin. But actually, we need the techniques. What are the techniques that we need to implement to be able to do that?
Okay, there are a whole raft of these techniques.
Yeah.
And all the techniques, the way to look at them is as board games, effectively, from an adult's point of view. Adults are brilliant at useful because we've got well-established worlds of what is. We are rubbish when it comes to novel, because novel means thinking differently. Entertainingly, young children are brilliant at novel, but rubbish at useful. As they grow up, we fill their virtual filing cabinet full of stuff. So they have patterns for virtually everything, at least they think they do, and those patterns dictate our lives. Young children are brilliant because they play. Yeah. And these techniques will only work, these creativity techniques. There's a whole raft of these techniques that you can use, all of which can be considered as different kind of board games, and each board game has a different set of rules. We as adults told to play are rubbish. You tell young children to play, they're brilliant. As we grow up, we lose that ability to play. Adults need rules, and so all of these techniques have rules. One of the key techniques that we use, actually, and I always recommend to organizations, if you've got a problem you can't solve, and you're serious about creativity, forge a relationship with a local primary school. You've got a problem you can't solve. All it says is, in the world in which you're trapped, you can't solve the problem. You need to get out. Go into a classroom of 7-year-olds. Top tip. Get permission from the headmaster or headmistress before you wander into a classroom of 7-year-olds. Good luck trying, by the way, but anyway, get in. Schools love this stuff because what you're about to say to the kids is, we as adults are rubbish at this and we need your help, please. It is brilliant for building self-esteem and teaching them the value of creativity. Yeah. Explain your problem to the kids in terms that they can understand it. Take all the corporate speak out of it. Just explain it in terms they can understand. Break them into pairs, give them pen and paper, ask them to draw solutions to your problem. That's it. So nice, simple explanation. Cut out all the corporate stuff. Break them into pairs, pen and paper. Draw solutions to your problem. As soon as you say that, poof, the room takes off. I promise you. You have to wander around just to keep an eye on what the kids are doing. Never have I had the situation where one of the kids says, "Oh, Dr. Hall, before we do this, is it possible to get hold of the last 5 years worth of report and accounts? Because clearly I need to understand what the financial status of this organization is. Is there a SWOT analysis done? Do you have any hierarchical structure? What's the board structure? And what's the CVs like?" No one gives a damn. The kids go, "Oh, I can solve that." Bang. They solve it. Sorry, go on, tell me.
No, go on, carry on. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, sorry. Well, I was going to say, what they do is they solve it and they'll draw solutions that are solutions in their mind. They'll be novel. Of course they will. They're 7 years old. They'll be useless. Of course they will. They're 7 years old. That's a perfect intermediate impossible. And what you do at the end of about 10 minutes, that's all it takes. Collect all the drawings in. You've now got a pile of novel and useless ideas on how to solve your problem. Every one of those drawings will solve your problem. Your job is just to translate it. Say thanks very much indeed to the kids. Say you'll go back and explain what happened. You and a colleague sit there over a sandwich lunch, cheese and pickle sandwich, work your way through the drawings. Every one of them would solve the problem. Your job is to convert the impossible bit into possible. You're making useless into useful. Bingo! You've got a novel and useful idea. There are rules to the process, but you follow it. It cannot fail.
No, and there's a couple of things actually, I mean, that I want to pick up on, but you've got a brilliant, brilliant example of that in real life, which I absolutely love, and I wanted to share it with us today.
Now, I've got a range of cracky. So you go into a classroom of 7-year-olds. Trust me, it blows your mind. 5-year-olds, by the way, too young. It's difficult to get them keep on task. 10-year-olds, too late because they're trying to be grown-ups, for goodness' sake. They're all very sensible. 7-year-olds are kind of perfect. I did this in East London, and we had an organisation that was into automotive design. And they designed a brilliant new car. It was absolutely brilliant in terms of efficiency, in terms of mileage and what have you. It was just absolutely brilliant with one snag. Snag was every year you have to change the whole engine. So the engine was disposable, basically. Yeah. So you have this brilliant car, but you have to change the engine every year. And their problem was, how on earth are you going to get the public to buy the idea of changing the engine every year. So they thought about it for about a second and thought, oh, there's no way you can do this. We brought it into, we took that problem and thought this is perfect for creativity. So we had a local primary school and went into the classroom with 7-year-olds. The headmistress was delighted that we're doing this stuff. And we explained the problem. We said, look, we got an amazing car, but we need to change the engine every 12 months. How can you get people, owners of the car excited about having to change their engine every year? Yeah. Break them into pairs, pens and paper, poof, the room takes off. And we're having a look and you just keep an eye on what they're doing, collect all the drawings together. And then me and a colleague sat there and afterwards went through over a cheese and pickle sandwich, went through. And one of them was just mind blowing. They generated the idea was a disco octopus. And the idea was that whenever your car was due to have an engine change, a disco octopus descended from the heavens above your house, setting off an almighty neighborhood disco. There was dancing, there was music, there was people having a great time. It was just never go, oh great, there's a car change, the engine change is coming up. Oh, we got a disco, bang, 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 bang. The thrill, the excitement. People would be looking forward to, it's only 3 months and my car engine needs changing. We'll have a while of a time. It'd be brilliant. Was the idea that those kids generated. It was kind of bonkers. You could see the thread of the thought, but there's no way you could implement a disco octopus. It's just kind of nonsense. Anyway, we sat through it. It was kind of halfway through. We stumbled over the disco octopus, as you do. And we had a conversation. We said, well, actually, suspend judgment. If only that were possible, would it work? You know, well, you can construe a situation where that kind of thing would make people look forward to their engine change taking place. And we use it as a metaphor for something in the real world. And it took us about 10 minutes of knocking it around. And what we said we'd do in the end was, actually, if you made it a deal such that the supplier of the cars would have to manage the engine change clearly, and what they do is do it remotely. So if you've got an engine change coming up, what we'll do is we'll link in with a local educational establishment, whether it's a primary school, secondary school, or a college of further education. What we'll do is bring the car in, and we'll have part of what we'll do is use it as a learning tool to teach kids and teach adults about changing engines and what have you, and basically a tutorial, but make it fun at the same time, pitch it at the relevant levels. So actually it became a kind of neighborhood, and it was kind of a neighborhood focus. If someone was changing their car engine, cool, they changed it up, it's a party, let's go and watch and understand how. I've always wondered how that works. You can teach kids from primary school all the way up about car engines and about engineering. Brilliant in terms of driving the engineering agenda. Adults would never have thought of that. Imagine an adult brain, I know how to solve it. What we'll do is we'll have a disco octopus.
What would happen? Just wouldn't happen.
Out of the mouths of babes. The trick is to do what we're good at. Convert those ridiculous intermediate ideas into something that's practical. It's cool stuff.
No, definitely. It's having that open mind of that novel thinking. And from what I want to go back to a point that you said before, you know, because to get to that point as well, and if you are going to, the technique that you have with children, it sounds counterintuitive, but you need to have rules. Like you need to
absolutely.
So, and I think that's what's interesting as well, is that to be able to do the techniques, it's that you have to have structured play. You often think of play as being free, don't you? But actually, from what you're saying, is even with this example that you're giving now, there needs to be rules applied to how you're, if you say just be free, there needs to be some form of structure, which I think sounds counterintuitive when you're asking people to be creative and playful.
It is counterintuitive because it's the last thing people expect. Never forget, adults are rubbish when it comes to creativity. If you tell people to play or tell people to generate novel ideas they've never thought of before, if you want them to play, they go, well, how do we play? You know, what are the rules of the game? It's like getting a group of adults go, let's play Monopoly, but let's not bother with the rules and learn how to play. We've got a board, we've got some plastic houses of green, and well, some are green, some are red. We've got some fake money in note form. We've got a whole series of cards. We've got a little sailing ship here. We've got a racing car. I don't know. Let's play. How on earth is an adult going to play unless they've read the rules? You get young children and give them those same parts and say play, they'll have a whale of a time for hours. Oh, they'll just make it up as they go along. Yeah. Adults are rubbish. We need to be told how to play. If you're going to play Twister, it's quite different. You cannot do Twister on a Monopoly board. What you need is a different set of rules. If you're playing Kaplunk or Buckaroo or whatever it is you're playing, you can play with children, provided the children are the adults. Adults need to know the rules of the game. Children don't. Adults need to know the rules of the game. And there are loads of techniques, whether it's superheroes, bionics, synectics, a reversal. There are a whole host of these techniques which can be treated like different board games. They're different ways of playing, but each of them is geared at giving you a novel and useful idea, creativity, that can then be implemented to make money for the organization, innovation. That's the driver. So each one of these games gives you what you're looking for.
So how do you choose which game would be the best one to solve the problem?
Right. What you have to do is overcome your natural urge. What we tend to do is say, well, I've got a problem here. Which technique is going to be best suited? Oh, I think it's going to be superheroes. The only reason you've chosen superheroes is you think you know where the application of superheroes to this problem will take you, because you've got a pattern. What you have to do is just choose it randomly.
Right. Okay.
I say, as a facilitator, I say the next technique I'm going to use is bionics. I don't know what the problem is, but I'll apply bionics to it when it comes. Because otherwise you fall into the trap of trying to match the technique to the problem. And the only way you match it is because you think you know where it's going to lead you. That's a pattern. Get rid of it. We're trying to destroy those patterns. It's weird. But once you get the hang of it, it's a joy.
And actually, I think from what you're saying is you'd probably choose the technique that you think you're going to have a closed mind, because you're going to think, I'm going to choose that technique because I like the look of that. Yeah. And I think it might be quite fun. Whereas actually, you should choose the one that is your least favourite, well, because you're going to open your mind and you'll come up with those novel ideas.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my urging is always that people often say, when I'm teaching them how to do the techniques, you say, well, superheroes, I like superheroes, we'll do superheroes. And if superheroes works, the next technique you'll do is probably superheroes, because it worked last time. And in which case, before you know it, you're a one-trick pony. Here he comes with his superheroes technique, is what people mutter as you walk into the room. What you need is a toolkit with a range of different techniques. You have to keep yourself on your toes, because you have to think in the moment. It's like improvisation. Improvisation is invented in the moment. These creativity techniques work in the moment. If you can plan it, the last thing you want to do is tell people in advance what the problem is, who's going to be involved in the session, what the technique is you're going to use. Because what they'll do is try and solve the problem in a manner that's consistent with everyone who's going to be attending. And they'll twist the technique to fit what they've prejudged the answer ought to be. Nonsense. Nonsense. Don't tell anyone what's happening until they turn up.
So just actually 2 points just to build on what you were just saying. What do you do? And I think I'm sort of leading the question slightly because I know there's a technique that you use. What do you do when someone's got a fixed mindset and they're like, do you know what, this is nonsense. I've been here for years. It's not going to work. And how do you encourage them to open their minds and use one of your crazy techniques, but mind-opening techniques? And I know there is a specific example that I still remember now. I don't want to say, well, we'll say it's a superhero technique that you use. And there was a specific individual who was quite close-minded and thought, this isn't going to work. We've done it this way for years. How do you overcome that?
Okay, and there's kind of a baseline here, which is you only ever play with these techniques with people who want to play. Right. There's one miserable so-and-so in the session to kill the entire session, quite frankly. And a problem owner that doesn't want to play is a nightmare, quite frankly. Just don't do it. So what you have to do is sit down as a creative facilitator. I always sit down with a problem owner in advance and just talk them through the process so they understand why we're doing what we're doing. If they understand that,
I interrupt you there. You have to have a problem owner as well, don't you? You have to have,
to have a problem owner. You need someone who owns the problem that is then the focus for the creativity session. Everyone else who's in the room, you may have a few experts in there, but you also want some naives in there. Naivety is creative gold dust because they find it easy to suspend judgment. Experts are a pain in the neck because they're locked in the old ways of doing things. The facilitator is facilitating the input from both the experts and the naives to mix the novel and the useful as a service to the problem owner. So what I do is sit down with the problem owner and explain to them the shortcomings of that backward-looking perspective, to explain to them how it undermines and locks them in a particular way of thinking. If they can't solve the problem, it merely means in the world in which they're trapped, they can't solve the problem. These techniques will help you escape. If you can take them logically through the process, they begin to understand why it works and see the value of the session. I think the session you're referring to, we had an issue in an organization I used to work for, which was it was the horse racing forensic laboratory in Newmarket. I was chief exec there, and this was a glorious building when I joined the organization. It was 45,000 square feet of top quality laboratory space for about 100 forensic scientists. I mean, the ratios, if you're into space, nowhere there. This was vast, for a very small number of people. Very clever people, but this kind of just vast showcase for British horse racing. The reception was enormous. I mean, enormous. Take your average reception, multiply the floor area by about a factor of 5, make it a 2-story atrium with spiral staircases. Now you've got the hang of this place. There used to be a balcony. The spiral staircase went up to a balcony with board meetings off, and it was just glorious. Glass fronted, glorious. We had a huge mahogany reception desk, and Liz, who was receptionist, had been there a long time. She'd always been the receptionist, sat behind this huge sweeping mahogany desk, and everyone knew Liz from the nose up, really, because that's the view everyone had of her, because she was behind the desk. If people came as visitors, they'd come into this space, they'd open the double glass doors, they'd walk through, they had a half-mile walk to the reception desk, sign themselves in. There was then a half-mile yomp into the far corner to go and sit and wait to be picked up. Nothing ever happened in that space. It was vast, empty space. We were a drug testing company with controlled drugs all over the place. I mean, people didn't just wander in off the street. People were there by appointment. And we must have had 2, 3 people visiting every day, no more than that, all of them by appointment. And this huge reception area was kind of for their benefit, apparently. It was dead. It was dead. It just sucked the life out of you. And we said to Liz, actually, Liz, we should run a creativity session around this, see if we can create a world-class reception. And she said, yeah, good luck with that. She said, she's seen it all. Anyway, so I talked through and went through, and she was okay. And we held a session. I was facilitating it, as luck would have it. It was a lunchtime session, so out of work hours. We had a sandwich and a cake there and everything. And Liz came in as the problem owner. And we had a room full of people who'd done some of this creativity stuff before. Liz hadn't. And Liz came in and said, well, yeah, I've been sent here by my boss, which is always a great introduction to a creativity session, and kind of sat down. And she said, problem I've been given is how to create a world-class reception space. And that was it, basically. And so it was kind of, go on, let's see what you make of that then. And we were doing superheroes as the technique. And the idea with superheroes is we've got a whole series of cards. On each superhero card, I've got set here, actually. On each superhero card, we've got the definition of a different superhero. So we got that. We've got Superman over here. We've got Wonder Woman over here. We've got Spiderman over here. We've got a whole bunch. On the back of them, you have the description of the superhero. So you give everyone a card. There were about 5 people in the room, 5 superheroes. Each person has to read their card, and as they read it, they have to channel that superhero into their very bones and become the superhero.
Love it.
Bonkers. You only play with people who want to play. They then have to brainstorm solutions to the problem that you've got. And this was about world-class reception. And so we had Invisible Girl was giving it some of that. Wonder Woman was a magic bracelets, the Lasso of Truth was giving it some of that. Batman was in the room, so he was Batcaving and all that sort of stuff. Liz was Spider-Man. And Liz was very quiet, but you get caught up in the moment with this kind of bonkers stuff. Solving superheroes can solve any problem, by the way. They never stop. They're novel, but useless. Intermediate impossibles. Perfect intermediate impossibles. And Liz eventually said, well, if I'm Spider-Man, then what I'll do is, while no one's around the place, I'll be underneath the spiral staircase, 2 stories up, spinning a web. So I'll be busily spinning a web. So she got the Spider-Man thing. And she said, as soon as I see someone come and park up as a visitor, I'll swing the entire width of reception on a spider's web, poof, stick to the wall. I'm now 1 story up. From 2 stories, I've gone to 1 story. Poof. As the visitor walks through the door, I'll swing down and land right in front of them. Poof, I'm Liz. Welcome to reception at HFL. Now, I don't know what world class is, but I do know that if the receptionist, if Liz the spider receptionist could pull that trick off, how cool would that be? I mean, people would be telling everyone they meet about, we should go to reception at HFL because spider stuff is weird. Just go and see it. I don't know what they do, but go and see reception. Yeah. So we like that. We like that. Novel, too damn right. No one would ever have come up with that idea otherwise. Useful, absolutely not. We didn't have the web technology, and quite frankly, Liz didn't have the flexibility to do what she described. I mean, there's no way it was ever going to happen. So it's the perfect intermediate impossible metaphor for something in the real world. The real characteristic was that wow moment at the point at which someone walks through the double doors. We wanted them to go, whoa, didn't expect that, and sufficient magnitude to go and tell people about it. And what we ended up doing was saying, right, fine, we never have people drop in. Everyone who visits has a book slot. We know who's coming at what time. Yes. Make sure Liz is fully briefed on whoever's visiting, visiting. So if I've got a visitor traveling down from Manchester, I was based in Newmarket, traveling from Manchester to Newmarket to be with me at 10 o'clock in the morning. Dr. Smith's coming down from Manchester. Tell Liz. Tell her he's going to be leaving at about 5, 6 in the morning. Tell her to watch the roads. So as Dr. Smith turns up at 10 o'clock, she knows who he's come for because there aren't that many people coming. Write his name badge out. Go and open the door when he walks up. Open the door. Say, here's your badge, by the way, Dr. Smith. Delighted you can make it. What was the journey like? How was the road? We were watching the roads, just worried that Catthorpe interchange is a real pain. But we watched it. It seemed to be all right. Presumably you were okay. What time did you leave in the morning? To have a conversation, the like of which they'd never have in any other reception. They tell people about it. Memorable. And the rule was never have a visitor without Liz being briefed.
Which is brilliant, because that goes back to you were saying before, the children's technique, that you find the gold. She channeled Spiderman, enabled her to think in a novel way. So you've given her a rule book. You're like, no, you've got to think like Spiderman today. Came up with a ridiculous idea, but you pull the gold out of it.
So she can play the game. So you give her Spider-Man there. So Spider-Man, just for the rules, by the way, those are the rules that Spider-Man, those are his skills and talents. Now follow that rule. That's how to play. Now let's do what adults do. Convert the metaphor. We're good at that. This is serious creativity. The entire process can be contained in less than 60 minutes. Never have more than 6 people involved in the session. It's a small group of people in a focused time following the rules. No hugging trees. No wandering around in the fields tied together with ribbons in a stately home for a residential weekend. You've got a problem in the business. Get a small number of people who know how to play, focused for an hour. I promise you, these techniques will deliver for you.
It's brilliant. And I mean, I've had it firsthand, because I think, just before we close up and sort of wrap up, and if anyone's got any questions, please do post them in the comments, because we've got time to answer them. But from what you're saying to me is, you need to have rules. You need to be naive and open-minded. You need to have structure. You need to have people who are willing to play as well. What would you say, just as I always like to give people who are watching a quick takeaway, what would be a quick, obviously the techniques that you've given us, the examples of the superheroes, and even going into school to have structure, but as a takeaway for people who are watching, what would be like a quick technique that someone could use?
Okay. There's a technique called synectics, spelled SYNECTICS, which is a brilliant technique. I'm going to give you the post-it version of it. There are 2 types of creativity techniques. There are metaphor techniques and there are provocation techniques. Superheroes is a classic metaphor technique. So a superhero solution, the Spider-Man solution, was a metaphor for something in the real world, converted. Provocation techniques are about random stimuli. And so what we do, if you want to do post-it note technique, get a colleague who's got a problem. I want 2 problems. You've got a problem, find a colleague that's also got a problem, and kind of work in tandem together. Each of you should have 2 post-it notes. On the first post-it note, write down your problem definition. So both of you are writing down the problem definition. That's got to take, 30 seconds. Yeah. On the second post-it note, I want you to write down a possible solution to your problem that would definitely solve the problem, if only it were possible. It needs to be an intermediate impossible. Novel, but useless. So it can be bonkers, ridiculous, outrageous, illegal, indecent, amoral. I don't care, but it must solve the problem. So you've got a problem and you've got a potential solution. If only you could have implemented it, but it's bonkers. Both of you stand there with 2 post-it notes. Problem, solution. What you then do in the dance is walk up to each other and exchange your solutions. Don't change it. You've got to hold on to your problem. Don't give someone your problem. That's your problem. You now inherit someone else's bonkers solution to a problem you've never seen. That is your random stimulus. What you now have to do is look at the solution you are now holding and use that as your start point for solving your problem in the real world. Your problem is based on the real world in which you're trapped. The solution you've just inherited is ridiculous. It's outside of that world. It comes from a very naive space. There will be something in that random stimulus, bonkers though it is, that will force you to look differently at your problem. It might not happen immediately, sometimes it does, but it could take hours, it could take a couple of days. The trick is, don't let yourself off the hook. Suspend judgment. There is something in that bonkers solution that will allow you to solve your problem. Writing down problem, solution can only take 3 minutes. Exchange, 30 seconds. Task complete. Your job now is to convert, but you do it on your own, no one else involved. Can't fail. Yeah. Have to work, but you need to give it time. Does that work?
Yeah, and also the other thing is mixing up the teams, because when I worked with you, the first time I met you and I said that I had this problem that I just couldn't solve, the first thing you did was mix up our teams. We had people from different departments working together. And within the first 30 seconds, I had someone who worked in a different department to me who immediately saw the problem in a different light. So I had already fast forwarded with my problem that I've been ruminating on for the past few months, because someone just approached it in a different way. So actually mixing up the teams, it was, well, sounds so simple, but genius.
Absolutely. And that naivety is key. Lisa, just if there's a message from Cassandra, if you just have because this picks up on what Sunita has said perfectly. It's that naivety. What you need to do is have people in a creative problem solving session. You typically have experts in a problem solving session because they're the people who know what they're talking about and are all locked in the way in which you've always done things before. Naivety is genuinely creative gold dust, because these people are unconstrained by the way you've always done things before. So mixing someone who has a problem and can't solve it in the world in which they're trapped, mixing them with someone who doesn't understand that world anyway, is the perfect mix. The skill lies in the facilitator to form a bridge between the two of them, to generate take the useful, mix it with the novelty, bingo, servicing the problem owner. Can't fail.
It's the naivety, and it's also suspending judgment and bringing that together. So let's take some questions. We've got Cassandra's question. I'm just going to show it here.
Yeah.
What do we do about negative Nancy's? Brainstorms with the half-empty brigade. How do we pull them in without drama before they influence us?
I have a very direct line on this. This is an engineer's view on how to solve this. Here's my urging: never ever play with people who don't want to play. I just wouldn't involve them. If they're going to kill it, you see it in the playground. You see a whole bunch of 7-year-olds having a great game, but you can just tell, you clock little Johnny who's watching them play, and you know he's going to go and spoil their game. He wanders over, and in a trice, they're in tears, they're arguing, the game is destroyed. One miserable so-and-so, forgive me, in a creativity session will kill it. If you want to be creative, don't have the miserable so-and-sos in there. You will win those over time. It's a viral process. Why would you have people in a session that will kill the output from the session? Don't do it. And if they say, why aren't I involved? Say, well, you're too close-minded. You're going to kill the creativity. Here's the model. You're great at this, but you're not great at that. Therefore, since that's what we want, we're going to have to exclude you until you get the hang of how to do this. You will win those people over time. Once they see the outcomes and they understand how you got there, it kind of gives the strange techniques credibility, and people start to want to use them. Does that make sense, Lisa? So, and hopefully it makes sense.
So I hope for Cassandra, if that answers your question, Cassandra, I don't know if you can put a note in the comment, but also it reminds me of when we worked together on that where you were going to be the keynote, but then ended up expanding the program. We actually brought people in, and we handpicked those facilitators who were going to get on board to be able to embed it, because we knew that they would, come on board with the proper, with the techniques, and to be able to embed them in.
Absolutely, and the skill of facilitation, the skill of participation in one of these creativity sessions is not something that's normally taught in management circles.
No.
In management circles, we promote people who are great at generating useful ideas. I've got a problem, can you help me? Oh, crikey, that was a very quick solution. I've tried it, it kind of worked. Very good, those are the people we promote. We don't promote people who go, well, let's use this bonkers technique. It's a bit weird and fluffy. We promote people who are great at generating useful ideas. And if they're really good, we make them directors. And if they're exceptional, we make them chief execs. Those are the same people who can potentially kill creativity further down in the organization. The trick is get the organization to understand the need for it, then only involve people who want to play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cassandra says, and Wolf Ruthless saying it as it is, so a negative Rebecca. So you've answered the question. Okay. So
don't ruin your game, because why would you do that? But I know everyone does. I know people do. I occasionally have it where a client, I come out of a session with a client and they say, how did you find John? And you go, well, I think it was hard work. He said, yeah, we thought we'd try that because we know he's miserable, and we just wondered how you'd handle it. You go, why would you make my life so difficult? You've got a problem, you want some creativity around. Just give me people who want to play. Anyway, we get there, but it's just...
Yeah. So I think what's, just in sort of, wrapping up, it sounds like, well, you need to have these techniques, you need to have structure. You need to be open-minded. You need to be naive, like we're saying, naivety is gold dust, childlike curiosity. the time that we're living in is a good time to implement these techniques. If not now, then when?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the time is right. We've had our brain scramble because of COVID, and the danger is we're about to lock them again in the current new way of doing things. What this takes is leadership. What we need to do is to have people who understand the merit of challenging the way we've always done things, and they have the skills to bring people along with them. So what they're saying is, we're going to transform this place, follow me. And they need to have the skills to get people to follow them, despite the fact the leader might not quite know where they're going yet, but they're sure they'll get there in the end. That also takes courage. So it's a combination of leadership skills to get people to follow and come with you and overcome any barriers along the way. It's going to be hard, but we'll get there. What you then need is the courage to do it. The classic example of this, by the way, is JF Kennedy. 1961, middle of the space race with the Soviets and what have you. He gave a seminal speech, which was, he stood up and said, by the end of the decade, the USA will put a man on the moon and bring him back to Earth safely. And the key thing was bringing them back to Earth safely. Just shooting them off there was actually only half the battle. Bringing them back safely was a real difficult job. And it was kind of aspirational, inspirational, brilliant. Everyone went, yeah, let's do this. And you kind of go along with them. He actually did it, ridiculous though it may have seemed, in 1969. I remember primary school stopped and we all went to the school hall to watch it in black and white as the man hit the moon. And they brought them back to Earth safely. The courage of saying we're going to do this outrageous thing. He apologized to NASA afterwards, apparently, because NASA didn't know he was going to make that speech. And they went, yeah, well, thanks for that. Thanks for not telling us. We know how to do some of it, but we don't know how to do other bits. We're going to concentrate on the other bits, but we'll get there. So what JFK had was an amazing ability to lead a nation to overcome all obstacles. It takes courage, it takes phenomenal leadership skills.
Yeah. So it needs to come from the top down. It needs to, you need to have this, I suppose, this blind faith. And
absolutely.
And
well, you need to have trust. You need to have trust that the leaders know how to get there. And what you need to do as well is stop kidding yourself that continuous improvement is the same thing as innovation, because it's not.
It's not.
Not at all.
No,
this is quite different.
No,
different techniques. The two techniques, continuous improvement and discontinuous improvement or innovation, sit beautifully alongside each other. You just need to understand they're different, and they involve different techniques that use different parts of the brain. And that's the key bedrock for this. But they have rules. Follow them.
Follow the rules and play.
And play and just relax and enjoy. You have a good laugh. The embarrassing thing is you walk out of a creativity session having genuinely driven a step forward, driven a step function change in the organization, an idea that it's got to work, but you feel guilty because you laughed all the way through it.
No.
What not to like? You just got to put yourself together and just love it.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave. It's always a joy. I always learn so much every time I talk to you, and thank you so much for your time, your generosity, sharing your techniques. I personally have seen firsthand the fun and the joy of a group in a room, and how we've embedded the change and innovation, which is still happening now, within this organisation that we work in, the change. So it works. These techniques work. Where can people find out more? Come
to the Ideas Centre website, which is simply www.ideascentregroup.com. So it's ideascentregroup.com.
Yeah.
Come there, drop me an email at d.hall@ideascentregroup.com. So any one of those, just have a look. There's an app. If you download the app, which is just simply Ideas Centre, available on App Store and iOS, no charge whatsoever. It's got a whole bunch of supporting videos on there, case studies, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So just hunt out Ideas Centre one form or another, get in contact, have a look at the app. It'd be more than a pleasure to talk.
Absolutely. And your YouTube channel as well. There's some
the YouTube channel, which has a whole bunch of stuff on there as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon as well. Bye.
Brilliant. Thanks.